2010, if you can believe that. And we're having a visit at the museum. Doris June Lawrence, her sister Faye and myself. And we're going to talk about their school days, their work days, and the great experiences that they've had in education. Doris June, since you're the senior member here of the two, you tell us where you and Faye were born and where you went to your first school.
We were born in Granger County.
Okay.
And our first school was a one-room schoolhouse called Bellevue. And we didn't have a library, really. My parents and some other parents bought a set of World Book encyclopedias.
Goodness.
And my grandpa made a library table for those to sit on in a school building. So that's where our education started, with World Book encyclopedias in a one-room school.
Do you remember your teacher?
Yes, I had several teachers. Florence McGinnis was one. The best teacher I think I ever had in elementary school was Mabel Needham Clement, whose husband eventually I came to know because he was a supervisor in the Knox County schools.
Okay.
Herbert Clement in vocational ed.
Right, yeah. And did you have electricity in the school?
No, we did not. We had a stove.
Pot-bellied stuff.
Pot-bellied. Yeah.
And the teacher had to come every morning early, or she would give a boy maybe a quarter a week to come early and build a fire so it would be warm when we got there.
And so you had water outside?
We had a well outside, but the water wasn't very good, and we went to a neighbor's house and carried water to drink. And oh, it was wonderful to get to go to the spring and get water and be out of the schoolhouse for a few minutes.
Okay. How many grades were in that one room?
1 through 8.
1 through 8.
But some years there would be a grade where there would be a child, but most grades had 2 or 3, maybe, or 4 children in each grade. And we learned a lot. The first, second, third grade would learn from the 7th and 8th graders, you know, as we listened in each day to their lessons, and as they called it back then, recitations.
Recitations. Well, I went to a 2-room school for about 4 months in Knox County, Beach Grove, out on Highway 33. And so I know about the pot-bellied stove, and we did have a well that somehow when you pumped it, they had individual things that you could stand and drink out of. I guess that was really modern.
It was very modern compared to ours.
And here again, you see, Miss Doral went to the same type of school, and so did Earl. So, you know, that gives, I guess, our generation a different background to think about education, because a lot of Knox County schools were just like that when Miss Doral became superintendent.
Well, that's true, and you know, I really am thankful for having a different kind of experience, you know. I think that's educational in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you get to go to that school?
Yes, I did. I started there in 1st grade, and then after 2 or 3 years, then we moved to another school where we had transportation. The first years, we walked 4 miles. I tell my girls, my children, I walked 4 miles a day, 2 miles each way. And they think, poor mother.
What school was that?
That was Bellevue.
Bellevue.
But then when we started to going to Shady Grove, it was in Union County.
Right.
We had a neighbor who was given the transportation contract, if you call it that. He had a big old station wagon, you know, that had the wooden and a running board, and he would come up to our driveway and he'd go, ooga, ooga, and we'd run out, and we'd all pile in, and the bigger boys would ride on the running boards. Now, can you imagine that's the transportation?
Yeah,
But it was transportation, we didn't have to
Right.
walk.
that's right. Yeah. Well, I lived in, when I lived in the city, and I walked to school, you know, from corner of Magnolia and Morgan. I walked out to Park Junior, and I guess that was well over a mile. And then I'd walk a girlfriend home and walk back again. I guess we didn't think we were deprived, and I
Right.
certainly wouldn't have spent a dime to have ridden the streetcar.
Right,
if
well,
I could save
I
it.
walked, of course, we lived on Raleigh Avenue in the Arlington section, and I went to Christenberry Junior High, and I walked, and then when I started going to Fulton High, I walked, you know, back and forth. That probably was at least 2 miles or so. I went the back way, which, you know, I didn't have to walk Broadway,
Mhm.
but I walked all my years, you know, going to school, except those few years at Shady Grove when we rode the transportation.
Right. So, where did you live when you went to McCampbell?
I went to McCampbell.
Oh, you went to
We
McCampbell.
lived on Raleigh Avenue in the Arlington section. We moved from Granger County to Knox County when I was in 4th grade. And I went to Brownlow, one year.
Who
And
was principal then?
I cannot remember who the principal.
Gerald Bell by chance?
I don't think so. Now, my children went to Belmaris, and Mr. Bell,
Oh, Belmore.
now, that was Belmaris.
Oh,
But I
sorry.
don't know, I cannot remember. But I do know that Mary Costa's mother was my 4th grade teacher at Brownlow.
Okay.
And I think that's been so interesting.
Well, I was at Brownlow for a term because Macaulay burned. Okay, and Mr. Bell was principal during that time, and he was principal when I became a principal, and Nancy Sterling, who was at Macaulay, was still a principal, and I got to sit with them. And you know, that was so typical during that period of time. Now you're not going to find anyone that's principal to 4 years, and
Right.
I don't think they're going to even leave them out.
But I was in McCampbell two years.
Yeah. Well, let's show this picture. Faye recognized Mrs. Was it Mrs. Williams or Miss Williams?
I think it was Mrs. Williams. I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Who was her principal when she went to McCampbell. And it's very possible it was Miss, because you may
Well,
know that
yeah,
married teachers
teachers
were not allowed to teach,
Mhm.
and that began to break down during World War II
Right.
because there wasn't enough teachers.
And I had good experience at McCampbell. And
What size school was it?
um,
It was probably 1 through
it was 1 through 6.
6, because that was still
Because
the city.
then junior high was 7, 8, and 9, and then high school was 10, 11, and 12 at that time.
Mhm.
And then after McCampbell, I went to Christenberry, and then 1 year to Old Knoxville High, and then 3 years at Fulton High.
Okay.
I was in the 2nd graduating class.
So we're inner city, right?
Yes, we are.
You didn't even know it.
We're very much considered inner
Inner
city.
city.
Mhm. Now,
Doris, when you graduated from high school, then what did you do?
I went to work in the office at Miller's department store
Okay.
and worked there for a few years, and then I moved to Security Mills and worked, and then eventually went to Knox County Schools
Where did you start in Knox County School?
in what was called the personnel office then with Mildred Patterson.
So you weren't ever in any of the schools?
Any of
as
the
you said?
schools. No, I went to central office to begin with.
Okay. Well, tell us about working with Mrs. Patterson.
Well, I went to work for her on September 1st, 1965. And she was a wonderful supervisor. We developed almost a mother-daughter relationship. And of course, I worked with her till Miss Doyle left office in 1976. And she didn't have family, so I was her family. I looked after her business affairs, even wrote her checks, and took care of everything like that for her after she retired. And just loved her like I did a member of my family. And of course, since she and Miss Doyle lived together, I was very close to Miss Doyle also.
Okay. And you went a lot of places with Mrs. Patterson,
Well,
and Miss Doyle.
yes, I did. And did that, and as long as they lived and as long as they were able to travel.
Would you mind retelling the story of when you went to meet Billy Graham with Miss Doyle?
Well, one day I went to work and Miss Doyle called me down to her office, and I thought, well, what have I done? And she said, she called me Junie all the time. She said, Junie, she said, you know Billy Graham's coming here for one of his meetings, and she said, I've been invited to Cherokee Country Club this afternoon to get acquainted and to meet Billy Graham, and said, I want you to go with me. Said, we'll go after work. And I said, well, Miss Doyle, I'm not dressed to go to Cherokee Country Club. And she said, being the way she was, she said, well, you can go home on your lunch hour and dress the way you think you will be appropriate for that. So I went home and changed clothes and came on back to work, and as soon as 4:30 came, she and I headed out for Cherokee Country Club. Matt Prince met us at the door, and he took us back and introduced us to Billy Graham, and Billy Graham introduced us to Cliff Barris and on down the line. But I remember Miss Doyle looking up at Billy Graham, and she said, you know, she said, you're a lot better looking than I thought you were on television. And then when she got to Cliff Barris, she had a purse that was hanging on her arm, and she said, oh, I know which one you are. You're the one that does this all the time. She meant leading the music. Well, when we left, she said, well, Junie, what do you think about Billy Graham and Cliff Barris? And I said, well, I don't know what to think, but I said, they'll never forget you. They'll always remember meeting you.
So, did you meet anybody else that you care to mention? I don't know whether you went anyplace else with her or...
Well, I met several people, but I guess those two, Billy Graham and Cliff Barris, were the most renowned. Maybe Winfield Dunn. I met Governor Dunn through her, and I would go with her to Lincoln Day dinners and things like that, but I don't remember all the people. They were, you know, most of them were politicians, but one funny thing, one time she had asked my mother and daddy to go with her to a Lincoln Day dinner, and we were seated at a table, and they came and got her, and they told her that she was supposed to be at the head table. And she looked at mother and daddy, and then looked at me, and she said, well, I guess I'll just have to go sit with those politicians.
Well, the other story I wish you'd retell is the day you had to change clothes because you weren't dressed to go with her to pick beans. Tell us about
Well,
that.
she told me one day, she said, now, Junie, when you come to work tomorrow, she said, bring you some old clothes, because she said, after work, we're going to pick beans. And I said, oh, and she said, yes. She said, Pinky, that's her brother out on Martin Mills, she said, he's got a big bean patch, and we're going to pick beans. So I brought some old clothes, and after work, I changed clothes, and she changed clothes, and I still hope that no one saw us leave the office the way we looked, but we came out of the office and went out and we picked beans. I guess we picked 3 or 4 bushels of beans. And while we were picking beans, she said, you know, she said, if Pinky hadn't cut down these blackberry briars out here, we could come back in a few weeks and pick blackberries. And with perspiration streaming off my face, I didn't say anything, but I thought, oh, I'm glad he cut those blackberry briars down.
Yeah. You would have known Lucy Pinky's.
Oh, yes. Lucy and I became very close friends, especially after Mrs. Patterson died. You know, Miss Doyle died first. And I had promised Mrs. Patterson that when she passed away, if I could, that I would help clean out the house and so forth. And so Lucy and I helped the estate administrator. We cleaned out their house and so forth and so on. After Mrs. Patterson died, and we worked so many hours in that house, Lucy and I became good friends, and we kept in contact as long as she lived. She died a couple of years ago.
She's the one that gave me a lot of the things here that belong to Miss Doyle.
Well, see, they lived in the home place, the old Doyle home place.
And Billy is still living there.
Well, that's what I thought, you know, because what happened, what Miss Doyle told me was that about the time Mr. Patterson died, her brother Pinky got married and married Lucy, and Pinky and Miss Doyle had been living together. And so when he brought in a wife, that was when she moved with Mrs. Patterson, when Lucy came to the old Doyle home place to live with her husband Pinky.
Lucy was really generous. She looked for all the photographs that she could find. And I do have a photograph, and that will be in the book of Miss Doyle's parents.
Oh, good.
And another one of Miss Doyle's parents and all 11 of the children.
Oh.
So that's a great treasure to have. I'm sure you'll enjoy looking
Mm-hmm.
at that. And the names that those Doyle boys had. Unusual names, and even Lois was spelled L-O-Y-C-E, and I think Bert's name was Bernice, and so on. They had very unusual names in that family. I'm trying to think. Would you tell me a bit about Mrs. Patterson's funeral? Was it, I was out of town, Beecher was out of town, we were all in Florida because it was right at that Christmas.
It was
Well,
at
it was at
Christmas.
Christmas time. It was a couple of days before Christmas, and I was at home, and the sitter that was with Ms. Patterson, they had called me and said that she was in distress. So I went as quickly as I could to her home, and by the time I got there, she was gone. She had given me the information that she wanted for her funeral. She wanted a string quartet and what she wanted for her funeral. And so the estate administrator and I went and we selected everything. We selected the clothes and everything. But it was a beautiful service. Her pastor from First Christian Church did the service, and the organist from First Christian Church couldn't play, so Rose Mortuary, the organist there, played. And in addition to the string quartet, and it was a beautiful service with beautiful music that Mrs. Patterson would have wanted. It was a very cold day, and she died, I think, on Monday, and we had the funeral on Wednesday, and some people criticized because we had it that soon. But that was so near Christmas, and so that was the practical thing to do.
I've been to Mrs. Patterson's grave at Lyndhurst.
Lyndhurst.
I took pictures there, and I also went to Miss Doris' grave at Woodlawn.
Woodlawn, yes.
And that's kind of a sad thing. The Doyles are buried kind of in a row, and Miss Doyle has just a flat stone with her name on it and dates at the very back. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not.
I was there, of course, but
But
I
I
haven't
can't
been
help
back.
but wonder if anybody ever goes, the Doyle family, because there's not many in Knoxville now.
No, there's not many of them
And it'd
left.
almost take women, wouldn't it, to go?
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Well, Faye, let's get to you and then maybe the two of them. Tell us about where you started to school again and anything that
Through
you
my
care about.
education, I graduated from Fulton High School, and I had taken business courses. And Mrs. Carruthers was my business teacher, and she came to me and said, the White Stores, the grocery store
Right.
chain that was very popular in Knoxville at that time, they're looking for a secretarial person. And would you be interested in interviewing for this job? And I said, well, I think so. So I went to the White Store office. It was under, that time it was under the viaduct. And I was offered a position. So I graduated from Fulton High one night, and I went to work the next morning in the White Store's office. And I started out in IBM, and that was the very first beginning of the huge computer type things.
Right.
And they had every item inventoried, and they were on computer cards, and they were in these big trays. And I walked through there, and if I had an order from a grocery store, and if they wanted 10 cases of green giant peas, I'd pull off 10 of those cards and put them down. Then they ran through a machine, and they went to the warehouse, and those were delivered. That's how I started out. And then from there, I moved to the front desk as receptionist, and then I was offered the position of working with in the advertising office. And that was something I really enjoyed doing because I got to go to merchandising meetings. And when the salesman came with new things, they'd bring samples, and so I had a good time. But then I met my husband, and we married, and I worked until our first child came. And then I became a pretty much stay-home mother. Then I had 2 other children, and when our youngest child started the kindergarten, I applied and received a position as school secretary at Carter Elementary School. And I worked there for 4.5 years, I think, with Mr. Huffaker, who was a wonderful principal and was a wonderful friend. And then Miss Doyle's secretary, Mrs. Henry, retired. And Doris June called me at Carter Elementary and said, would you be interested in coming in and talking to Miss Doyle about taking Mrs. Henry's place? And I said, oh my goodness, it scares me if she even calls me on the telephone, you know, much less going in for an interview. But nevertheless, after talking to my family, I agreed to do that. And so in the spring of that year, and I cannot remember, I think it must have been 73 maybe, 72, in that area. And would you believe, being a school secretary, I was scheduled to have Easter week off. But it was time for me to go to central office, and of course,
They went
so I started out losing my spring break.
great.
But anyway, I had happy years with Miss Doyle. Very interesting. And she would, you want me to just keep telling you about this?
Yes.
Um, both of you know that Miss Doyle was not a loner. She wanted someone with her all the time. And so I would sit across from her, and she'd be talking on the telephone, and she'd be writing, and she'd be talking to me. She could do numerous things at the same time. And I became her personal shopper, her friend, I think. But now I want you to know that when I did any personal shopping for her, it was on my lunch hour.
Absolutely.
She was very careful not to use school time. I kept labels from her hose and her underwear in my billfold because I knew exactly what she wore. And I would walk to Miller's department store and shop for her, but it was on my lunch hour. And of course, she was a member of the Tennessee Textbook Commission. And all of those textbooks would come in to her for her to review and so forth. If you remember the old boardroom on the Hill Avenue building, it's full of shelves, and she shelved all of those books as they came in. Many Sunday afternoons, I was there shelving those. They had to be in order, and it killed me the year that we were doing social studies, because it would be my world and yours, this world and ours, theirs, and you know. But she got everyone, and when a new shipment came in, we had to shift all those books and put them in order. So I spent a lot of Sunday afternoons up there, and I must tell you, Miss Doyle would come in with her polyester pants on and her pajama top. And that's how she would be dressed. I'd rested from church and had lunch, and I'd meet her up there. And we would go through those, and of course she had her green stamp that said Mildred E. Doyle, and we had to stamp the front page and the back page, you know, for you to know that those books belonged to her. One Sunday afternoon, we were there, and Mrs. Patterson called, and she said, Mooney, you know that's what
Right.
Miss Patterson called her. She said, fire department just called us, and there's a fire at Dandy's school. And Miss Doyle said, come on, Faye, we're going to go. We got in that old Pontiac, blue Pontiac, and she went zooming out the interstate. She said, now, if they stop us and ask if we're going to a fire, we'll say, yes, we are going to a fire. When we got there, the fire engines were just leaving. It was really not a major fire. There was a trash can at the back of the building, and there's some trash in it. Evidently someone had dropped a match, so it really didn't damage anything. But she waved to the firemen, and then when we got through there, she said, I'm going by the fire hall and thank them. So there she went marching in the fire hall with her pajama top and her polyester pants on to thank the firemen for coming out, you know, to help. And I went to many events with her. Of course, she was very involved with the Knox County PTA, and they had luncheon meetings. I don't know, I can't remember if they were quarterly or monthly or whatever, and they would bring covered dishes, and they'd meet at different places. And Miss Doyle would want me to go with her, and I would go with her if it happened to be in South Knoxville. She'd say, now let me drive you around Browns Mountain. And she'd drive me up around Browns Mountain where she grew up, and could tell me some wonderful stories that I will not repeat from different people. But she was a hard-working person. And I will tell you this, when she interviewed me and told me what my salary would be. She said, and you will get $5 for every school board meeting that you attend. You just write down the note when and give it to the payroll clerk. So I did that, and over several months, I guess close to a year, but I never got the $5. So finally, I was brave enough to ask Miss Doyle about my $5, and she said, "Have you not been getting your $5?" And I said, "No." So she called Mr. Dougherty, Mr. D,
Mr.
the
D.
business manager, and he said, "Faye hadn't been getting her money." He said, "Well, I just decided not to give it to her." Said, "You started her out more than I thought she needed anyway." So I didn't get the back pay, but I did get started the $5. So I thought that was interesting, and of course I did her secretarial work, kept her calendar. I also did the agenda, all the boards, the Board of Education. When I first went there, she'd call me in her office, and she'd start out the agenda, and then I would fill in. Then after a while, I could start out with, I knew what the invocation was going to be and the approval of the agenda, this thing. So after several months, she said, "You know how to start all of that. Why don't you just start?" So little by little, I really helped, or I thought I helped, develop the agenda. And all of the printed materials for the agenda, of course, were just in stacks. So I'd had a big table, and I would go and walk around through them, pick this page and this page, and that's how I collated them.
That was the old way of doing it.
That was the old way.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to get some water right in the middle of this. I remember, I guess you and Doris Jr. both being involved in fixing meals for the board.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Tell us about that.
I would go, she and Ms. Patterson would provide food for the board often. And they would get things started at the house, and then I'd go over and get and bring over, and or I'd have the grocery list, and I'd run out to get things. But Ella Mae was the, I guess we would call her the housekeeper, or but she was very attentive, to Miss Doyle, and
And to no one else.
right,
I
right,
remember all that.
right. But she, they were very good cooks and prepared really nice meals for the board on occasion. And Doris June, we ought to tell them about going over taking care of the cat after work.
Please tell about the cat. I think that didn't Bill Orr have a hand in
Yes, but
Tom scared us.
I hated that cat because he hid from us all the time.
Well, Miss Doyle had given Mrs. Patterson a cat for Christmas one year, and the litter box and everything that went with it, and that cat just took over the household. And he weighed, I think, about 17 or 18 pounds. And he didn't like me because when I'd be over there, if he'd get up on the furniture or something, I'd get a paper and make him get down. But they would be gone, and Faye and I would go over after work to let Tom out for a little while and feed him, and he would hide and he wouldn't come back in. And one time I couldn't find him, and I looked, and finally I found him in a chair under the
tablecloth.
The tablecloth.
He was
that
hiding.
covered him.
I was so mad at that cat that day I could have killed him.
But anyway, they were going to be gone for several days, and so after work, Bill Orr and Joe Chandler were going over to get Tom and take him to the vet to be boarded. Well, Tom didn't like men because he was accustomed to Miss Doyle and Mrs. Patterson. So they had a hard time catching him, and when they did, Bill went and got a pillowcase and put Tom in that pillowcase. Well, Tom had big paws,
Yeah.
and so he shredded that pillowcase all to pieces by the time they got him in the car. And Dr. Chandler was very particular with his Cadillac. He wouldn't let anybody smoke in it or anything. Well, Tom got loose in the car. Dr. Chandler was trying to drive, and that cat was running around, and it would get up on the seat behind him, and so forth and so on. But the lady who worked for Mrs. Patterson and Miss Doyle at that time, she said, when they came back, she said, "Now, I didn't take one of your pillowcases." She said, "Mr. Orr and Dr. Chandler got that pillowcase," and said, "Tom tore it up."
So working in that office was very different from any place else you could work.
Very different.
Very.
It had a very family atmosphere, a caring out, atmosphere. And we were expected to work hard. I guess I worked harder for Miss Doyle and Mrs. Patterson than I did anybody else that came along.
Well, that's
Because
true.
So
I
did
worked overtime, and I'd stay late at night, and Faye would too, and so
And see,
were.
the office was open from 8 to 5, and Doris June went in at 8 in the mornings and worked till 4:30, and I went in at 8:30, and then I worked till 5 o'clock, so that the office was open, that length of time. But Miss Doyle was very, very careful with the time element, with that situation, with making sure you use the time correctly. And this is, Pinky owned a liquor store on Chapman Highway.
And a pool hall and happy
It's
holiday.
right.
I knew Pinky.
But one day, a friend of Miss Doyle's called and said, had a little farm, and he said, "Mildred, I've got a bunch of cantaloupes I want to give you." And said, "I'll leave them at Pinky's place, the liquor store." And so later, at lunchtime, Miss Doyle said, "Oh, Faye, would you take my car and go over to Pinky's and get cantaloupes?" And I said, "Well, sure." And so I drove her car over and walked in the liquor store and got that box of cantaloupes. And when I came back out, I thought, what if some of my friends happened to be driving down Chapman Highway? Could I ever convince them that I had cantaloupes in this box and not liquor? So we had a big laugh. But Miss Doyle gave me a cantaloupe for my trouble. But we laughed a lot about that.
Well, she expected supervisors to work just as long as she did.
Right.
No, 24 hours a day was fine if it was for Knox County.
That's exactly right.
You remember the snow days, supposedly?
Oh, mercy, do
Talk
I.
about the snow.
We were just talking about that at the luncheon where we've been today with retired secretaries. We were expected to come in on snow days. But then there would be people who didn't come. Well, she didn't like it. And she tell me to get the yellow pad and go around and get the name of everybody who didn't show up. Well, then after 2 or 3 days, that was sort of, I don't know whether anything was taken, whether it was taken care of, or if those people had to give a day of vacation. I really didn't know the follow-up. But it wasn't very pleasant for me to have to walk around and get names of people who didn't show up on a snow day.
Well, I remember I worked for Miss Doyle, I guess, just in central office from 74 to 76. It seems longer because I knew her as a principal. But I lived out in Holston Hills, and the snow was bad. She sent somebody with a 4-wheel drive to pick up the supervisors.
Well, she expected, she expected a lot. And with the Oh, and I must tell you, when I went in to work, when she was working on budget, um, I would go in on Saturdays and it would just be the two of us there. And she liked the Big K hamburgers that K's ice cream shop made up on Church. But she liked the French fries from McDonald's on Chapman Highway. So she dropped me up by K's because they made the hamburgers from scratch.
Right.
And she dropped me off, and I'd order each of us a hamburger. And she'd zoom over to McDonald's on Chapman Highway and get French fries. By the time she'd get back, the hamburgers would be ready. I'd be standing out waiting. We'd go back to the office. I'd go upstairs to the Coke machine, had the bottles where you pulled them out of the side. And we would have, she would provide my lunch that day with a hamburger and French fries and a Coca-Cola in the green bottle. And that was one of her favorite meals.
Talk a little bit about the Cadillac.
Well, I know the Cadillac was supposed to have been a retirement gift. They took the old, I don't know if it was KCEA, I don't know what group decided this, and so they took the old Pontiac and traded it in for the Cadillac and had a big, school-wide administrative type, almost like a retirement party. But then she decided, not to retire.
Did you attend that?
Yes, I did. I did.
Okay.
But then when she didn't, retire, and but I can remember so well the first time she asked me to drive that car to do something. I prayed the whole time because I thought, if I do something to this car, I just can't stand it. But I think that maybe had something to do, and I'm not sure it was, with her defeat.
I think it was a big thing. When did she tell you that she was going to run again? Did she tell you?
I'm not sure that she ever told me for sure she was or was not.
Did she ask you about running? What you thought about it?
No.
What about you, Doris?
No.
Well, she had asked me because from her point of view, I became responsible for all the parents because I and parent involvement. And the Republicans were pushing her to run. And of course, Beecher knew he was going to run for superintendent, and he would not listen to me. And all of that presentation happened on his birthday.
I did not realize that it was
on his birthday. And in Beecher's writing, he finally tells the story of he did not know what was happening until they got to Doyle High School that night. And Billy Kay had them come in the office, and he sprang this, that he had met with this, that, and the other, and that he wanted to ask, he said, Miss Doyle, or Mildred, whatever he would call Miss Doyle, said, we want you to run again. And looked at Beecher and said, I'm sure you'll step aside because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I picked up on it when, you remember Billy Kay said that he didn't see any reason why Miss Doyle couldn't drive that car for the next 4
right.
years.
Now, I do remember something of that.
So that was the announcement.
I worked so hard for her election.
We all did.
My children, we spread out. At that time, we had a daughter in UT and she went to one of those schools and worked all day. I went to McCampbell and worked all day, and we were, of course it was August, and we were so hot and we were so sunburned, and we came home and all got bathed and dressed to go to the victory party. And when it was not a victory party, I think it was one of the saddest nights of my life. I cried all night long. By the time we got to the Fort Hill building, you know, for the party, Miss Doyle came out. Of course, we've been hearing returns on the car radio. And she came out and brought me in her office, and she said, "Faye, baby, we've lost it." And I said, "Oh, no." She said, "I've lost my own precinct." She said, "We've lost it." And it just broke my heart. But then when Mr. Hoffmeister asked me to stay on, I knew I was supposed to have tenure, and I didn't know, I knew I would not be back in the superintendent's office. But I thought, I'm supposed to have tenure, and maybe I'll have a job somewhere in the system. I wouldn't mind to go back to a school. But then, as the weeks went by, and then Mr. Hoffmeister had asked someone to ask if I would consider talking to him, you know, about staying on. And so it was a big change for me.
Had you ever met him before?
No, I had not
See,
met
I
him.
hadn't either.
I had
Laid eyes
never.
on the man.
I had seen him one time when we were in the city. Of course, we were in the Fort Hill building, and of course the commission met in that big room.
Mm-hmm.
And he had come in for something about, I guess, construction something. And I remember he had on a white suit, and someone called and said, "There goes Earl Hoffmeister. He's the one who's running against Miss Doyle." And I just got a glimpse of him, and I had never met him until, of course, I'd seen pictures during that, but I had not met him. I did not know him at all. And but after I worked for him for a while, I realized that Miss Doyle and Mr. Hoffmeister had similar backgrounds.
We'll talk a little bit about that because...
And their biggest, the thing that impressed me most, both of them, what they were interested in, the boys and girls in Knox County schools.
Now, you couldn't imagine either of them considering taking a job in another system.
That's right, never.
Well, they had both been big in sports, too.
They had.
Both had a farm background.
And Mr. Hoffmeister's father had school bus contracts for years. He had run Knox County school buses over in the south, and I didn't know that, of course.
I didn't either until I did.
Until. So their backgrounds, I could ease in because their backgrounds were very similar.
And they both were good old boys, right?
That's absolutely.
Miss Doyle never lost that country background.
Right.
In her.
And they were interested in the students. If a child was having a real difficulty, and the parent would call Miss Doyle, she'd say, "Honey, just come on in and we'll talk about it." And Mr. Hoffmeister did the very same thing.
It's interesting to me how much they had in common.
It really was.
And the other thing is, both of those people, they were bright. You know,
In their
a lot
way.
of people underestimated Earl Hoffman.
That's right.
But he was smart enough to let people do their job.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
He earned my respect. I didn't know him, but, and I told him later, I said, "You've earned my respect because I didn't know anything about you."
Well, when I met with him, I said, "Why don't we just have a trial period?" I said, "You might not like me, and I might not like you. So could we let's just have a trial?" And then we never discussed that trial period anymore. because I think I had to earn his respect, and I think he had to earn mine, because I do know that there was a particular person, I knew who she was. She came to the first, I guess, 6 months, board member, sat there and took notes, because I think maybe they didn't trust me that I would be loyal to him. But I told him, I said, I was very loyal to Miss Doyle, and I said, I cannot work for you if I'm not loyal. And I said, I will be loyal to you.
I know the members of the staff tried to get me to go to the Cedar Bluff as principal after Ms. Doyle lost the election. And I was the only one on the staff that was certified as the elementary principal. So Ms. Doyle really wanted to send somebody down there, you know. And the person that came to me, I just told him that I couldn't do that, because I felt like that was Mr. Hoffmeister's place to make that appointment. And he informed me that I would no longer be working for an individual, that I'd be working for a system. And I said, no, that's not so. If I cannot work for Mr. Hoffmeister, I'll resign. You know, I won't work for the system. And so I was like you, it didn't take me long to be won over for that Mr. Hoffmeister really had the boys and girls, the teachers particularly, and the system in mind.
Well, the secretaries too. I remember he had just been up there a few days, and I went over to his office door one day and I said, may I come in and speak with you? And I said, I haven't known you, but I said, I've worked for Miss Doyle, and I said, I'm not a politician, but I did everything I knew to do to get her reelected. But I said, as long as I work here and your name is on my paycheck, I'm going to be loyal to you. But I said, Miss Doyle and Miss Patterson and I have developed a social relationship. And I said, you may see us out together somewhere, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to be loyal to you as long as I'm here. And if I can't, I will resign. And he said, I would have expected you to work for Miss Doyle.
That's what he told me.
And he said, I appreciate your confidence, and I appreciate the fact that you came to talk to me. And from then on, we just made it fine. We just hit it off.
But then he also asked for you to do any work that Miss Doyle needed to be done.
Any secretary
And I could, you know, he said, feel free to do anything that Miss Doyle needs to be done in the way of secretarial work.
I find it amazing. And of course, I got to know, I never called him Earl till I started doing this biology,
Right,
because
I did.
you know, I was never comfortable. Like, who would have? I would definitely not have called Miss Doyle anything but Miss Doyle.
That's right.
But I was the same about, like Mr. Nicholson. I just couldn't. Mr. Nichols, I had a hard time going to first names, but I didn't get to really know him until I did this biography. But the one thing that has impressed me through the years, I have never heard Mr. Hoffmeister say anything uncomplimentary about Miss Doyle.
No, I
And if
didn't
he ever
think
said
that.
anything, it had to have been in a closet at home
No.
somewhere. And I think that is amazing.
And he invited her back. Now, she was never comfortable to come back to anything, but he invited her back to, and of course, he had worked for her.
Right.
And Ms. Patterson hired him. Isn't that what?
I think Miss Doyle actually had it.
Well, I knew
I know
that they, and I know you probably know this, probably it's in some of your history, but as a side job, he repaired typewriters at night, and they gave him keys to the schools where he could go in and repair the typewriters. So it's been I could not have had a more interesting work relationship with both of them.
I assume both of you are glad that you work for Knox County Schools.
Extremely
Very
glad.
much.
I wouldn't have missed it. I guess there's no time limit on this, but out of the people at the central office, who are some of the people that you think of as that you enjoyed working with?
J.B. Lyle was one of my favorites. J.B. and I had known each other. He had been the choir director at my church, and I sang in the choir. Then he came in to be music supervisor.
And he sang at my wedding.
All right. So
He sang at my father's funeral, and he was just one of my favorites. Though I liked all the supervisors. They were always all extremely nice to me, and we had lots of contact because since I was in the personnel office and Mrs. Patterson was doing the hiring and so forth, and sometimes she'd bring a supervisor in to talk with a prospective teacher, and so I couldn't say anything against any of them, really. But I guess because J.B. and I had known each other for so many years, he was just one of my favorites. And I remember when he was diagnosed with cancer, he called me and he said, "I want to tell you my diagnosis." But he said, "When I come back to work, I don't want you to feel uneasy about talking with me." And I thought that was so thoughtful of him, because he knew then that his situation was terminal. But he was preparing me for that when he came back and we met in the office for the first time after the diagnosis.
I always think about Carolyn Sullivan,
Oh, I love Carolyn.
Sweet, sweet person.
Sweet person.
I think about, so many of them. Miss Selby, I just love Miss Selby.
Nobody like Willa. Absolutely nobody.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And of course I had a lot of contact, with the supervisors and school board retreats and, all of those things. And I think back and I think how hard I worked. I would prepare for the school board retreats. Ms. Blaylock over at Doyle High would prepare the snack, things, and my husband and I would go pick them up, and then we'd go wherever the retreat was. And I do like the continental breakfast, because at that time most hotels did not have the continental breakfast.
Right.
And we'd either have them in Gatlinburg or somewhere, either September or January, because those were the months when the rates were
The lowest.
lowest. And I think about that, and I remember Dale Workman. Of course, he was the law director. Now
That's
he's
right.
the judge, Judge Workman, but he was the county law director, and of course he went to the retreats, and I would take my coffee maker from home, and I would start washing it every night. He said, "Don't wash that coffee pot, just rinse it out and start it," And I remember, those funny things.
Mm-hmm.
And the relationship that I had with a lot of, I guess you'd call them politicians, but I still had the name recognition from some of, like Judge Bozeman and Barbara and those people that we worked. And Lib Hotchkiss, I see Lib and her husband now, and they're like us, they're getting older. And in fact, I saw them at the Symphony, I guess, recently, and I thought, how do they manage? But they do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we have to tell you about the funny thing about the cheerleading. Did you want to tell
No,
that?
no, I don't want to tell the story of the cheerleading.
I don't know whether you were still there or not.
No, but it's an Earl's biography.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about the cheerleading. That was,
I think you should tell it.
And so I just came in from lunch and dropped by Faye's desk, and she and Barbara Webster were back there, and they said, well, let's just break into the staff meeting, which was just right next door. And I think it was Sarah Simpson that was up making a presentation, and the three of us just burst in the door. We just opened the door and burst in there, and we started 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits a dollar, all for faggots, stand up and holler. And it just about scared some of the people to death that were, their backs were to us, you know. But after we did that, we came out and we said, what have we done? And my face was so hot, and I'm sure so red, because after I thought about it, I was embarrassed. But then Mr. Hoffmeister thought it was extremely funny, and he called one of the principals, or told one of the principals what we did, and he did a drawing.
I bet it was Fred.
Fred Knight.
Fred Nidifer did a drawing, and it was, he had, Barbara was blonde, and he had our hair, you know, a pretty good likeness of us, but that was one of the things that Mr. Hoffmeister took with him when he retired.
But then, we didn't know anything about that, and he called the three of us into a staff meeting and presented that picture to us. And then later, he had Fred Nidifer do the 3 little pigs and had us depicted, you know. And he called us in staff meeting with that. And we started singing Lay's 3 Little Pigs because we didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So we did have some fun, more family-oriented type employment, really.
When did you retire, Doris Jean?
I retired at the end of 1992.
And you were there
Till 93, I believe.
talk just generally about the change when the 2 school systems were joined.
Well, the biggest change came with the merger.
Right.
From the time that the merger took place, the system was very different from that time. You know, when, for us, you know, central office, when the other, when Knoxville City's central office came, it changed everything. And it was not the pleasurable place to be after that, because of all the changes that took, and there was resentment. And I think that some of that resentment will stay as long as we all live. Now, it's changing, I know it is now, because most of us who were there at that time are retired or gone or whatever. But there was resentment, and I felt the resentment because, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Many of those secretaries had been with the system for years and years, and they were on a higher pay scale. Many of them had been in the system long enough to retire, and they retired, but then they came in on our salary schedule, and they were receiving, some of them, $1,000 a month retirement. And there was resentment there. I don't know, it was not open resentment, but it was there. I mean, I felt some resentment.
Well, Jim Bellamy once said that the difference between the county and the city was that the city was a system and Knox County was a family.
And that's...
And Miss Doyle was the mama. And whatever Miss Mama wanted, Mama got. But the Knox County Central Office was very affectionate too, if you remember. There was, everybody hugged one another. And I had worked with the city, the system, and you never saw that. They were very businesslike.
Well, we had, there were 2 secretaries and a director of personnel, and we had about 7 people from personnel that came in from the city school. So three of us had been accustomed to working together, and then to add about 7 more folk, you can imagine the change that we experienced.
I think it was difficult on everybody's part.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sure it was.
very.
And I understand what you're saying. There's still that feeling. And even here, I've had some people who wanted this called the Knoxville City and Knox County Museum. And I can understand that. They hate to see that name leave, Knoxville City. And see, even the evening high school was Knoxville Evening High School. And they changed it to Knox County High School. And I resented that because I graduated from Knoxville City.
Right.
And you know, so I guess everybody was touchy about, it was tough to see the Knoxville City school system just disappear.
Well,
And of course,
see,
I graduated. I was a,
And I did too.
and I did. I went to Park Junior for
So did
1
I.
year, and then to Knoxville High, graduated from Knoxville High School. And you know how loyal we were in Knoxville High School.
Absolutely.
So much loyalty. So it was a difficult time.
And now it's too big for my liking. No, the system is too big, there's too many schools, there's too many of everything. To me, it's just, it would have been so much better if you know, that Earl suggested or recommended that they keep the system separate and just fund them and report to one board. And you know, you wonder about if they had done that. I don't know exactly how they could have done it, but maybe if they had a transition plan. But most people that said anything publicly, even from the city, said that the merging went far smoother than anybody ever thought that it would. So, but I'm like you, I'm glad that I was part of Knox County Schools.
Oh, I am
yes,
too.
I am too.
That experience was one that really left me with good memories.
Well, I want to thank both of you for the time and for sharing this afternoon.
Well, I want to thank you for all the hard work you've done with the museum.
Oh, I do
I'm
too.
very impressed. This was my visit here, first visit, and I'm very impressed with it.
Well,
Most-
I'm very grateful to you for trying to leave a legacy for us. Someone had to do it, and I'm glad you
Chose to do
Chose
this,
to
and
do
I'm
this.
grateful for it. And I can't say that I was happy to try to write the things, my feelings about Mr. Hoffmeister and Miss Doyle, but I'm really glad I did it. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to do this, but thank you for allowing us this.
we appreciate.
That's